What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we are updating Crystal Beast. The structure deck is finally out, and oh boy, what a structure deck we just get. For any fans of the GX anime and of this specific deck, I don't think that Konami could have done a better job for giving us actually good support, because we all know how unplayable this deck used to be for the longest time ever, and it's still not anything competitive, don't get me wrong, but the cards that it got for the archetype that we're talking about, now this deck can actually pack a punch, and in a lot of certain scenarios, this card can abuse a lot of generic extra deck monsters, because of the spamming ability it has to seal out games, and it does have tools in the main deck to disrupt the opponent, be consistent, and go for game, which is basically exactly what any deck that wants to compete should have in order to be able to do it. So yeah, this deck finally can become a really decent, maybe not even rogue strategy, but again, it's a deck that for local levels you can have a lot of fun with and also have some success with it. So I'm super excited to bring you guys this deck profile, because it's a build that you're not going to see too often in other people's profiles, because I feel like there is a certain stuff the deck that need to be included in order to make it even better, because when you're playing it pure, you're very limited in what you can do. You're going for rank 4 plays, then you're relying on the trap cards with rank 4 monsters on the field. That's fine and all, but I feel like there are a lot more potential cards that can be abused in a deck like this because of certain attributes and certain search cards that the deck has, so it can actually become a bit better. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So let's start with the monsters. We have 3 copies of Crystal Beast Sapphire Pegasus. This is the bread and butter of the deck. On summon, it puts a Crystal Beast from the hand, deck, or graveyard in the spell and trap zone. This monster, being a wind attribute beast monster, makes it super important for the strategy we're going for, because there are a lot of cards that can not only search this card, but can also search another card with the same stats, being wind and beast, so you can actually have more interruption. But yeah, this is the only one of the OG ones that you want to be maxing out just because of how useful it is. With the new trap cards, you need to have a lot of Crystal Beast monsters in the spell and trap zone in order to be able to disrupt your opponent without having to destroy cards from like your hand, your field. You just need to destroy the monsters that are not doing anything in your spell and trap zone and basically disrupt your opponent this way. So yeah, this card at 3, really important. We have 1 copy of Topaz Tiger. The reason we're playing this card is because it's the biggest Crystal Beast. When it attacks, it gets to 2000. It's a monster that can deal with some other problematic monsters maybe this deck cannot deal with when you're just going for a grind game and you won't have at least a beater to search so you can attack with something. And we need more names. We are not playing all 7 of them. We are not trying to summon Rainbow Dragon or the extra deck monsters, because being able to summon these cards, you will need to commit a lot in your deck in order to do that. They're decent monsters, but the thing is that you have to place so many bricks in order to make them work, so it's not really worth taking the risk of breaking in order to summon these. There are a lot of other ways to go for game this deck, but again, we do need to play some names just because we need to get access to them with a lot of spells and traps, and also pop them with our trap cards to disrupt the opponent, and these are the monsters you're going to be putting in your spell and trap zone most of the time with Sapphire Pegasus. We have 1 copy of Cobalt Eagle. The reason we're playing this card specifically is because it's the wind monster, because we are locked into winds, which and then with an engine I will show you a little bit later, so we need to be able to summon at least 2 Crystal Beasts under this restriction, so that then we can use them for a certain combo during our opponent's turn. And we're playing 1 copy of Ruby Carbuncle. This is the most important one during the grind game, because when you have a full spell and trap zone with Crystal Beast, then you can use a card like Crystal Beacon to summon this card from the deck, and then you get back all those monsters onto the field, and you can go for a Link 4 play or rank 4 play. You have a lot of things you can do with the deck, because the extra deck is so versatile since it did not get anything specific other than fusion monsters, so we basically have to resort to relying on generic monsters that used to exist beforehand. But yeah, this card, unfortunately, it's a level 3, so it's not going for any good rank 4 play, but it's a light monster, so we can use Lina in the extra deck, which is a really powerful monster, and yeah, this card is basically the pendulum summon of the deck. We have 3 copies of Crystal Beast Rainbow Dragon. This is a recent card that we got. That was actually another piece of support before the structure deck, and it's a card that basically fixed a lot of issues for the deck, because the deck did not really have a way to get something good in the spell and trap zone, because all the monsters you were putting there, they were not doing anything on their own unless you were just using Ruby Carbuncle to special summon them. But this card, while it's in the spell and trap zone, you can banish it and then basically search a Rainbow Dragon and special summon a level 4 lower Crystal Beast from your deck with its effects negated. So this card basically makes Pegasus a 1-card rank 4 play, which is really good. Being able to do plays with just 1 card also makes a deck really good, because that's what the decks really want to do. They want to make as much as possible by using as few resources as possible, and this is what this deck can do with this card. And also it gives you a search that basically makes it a little bit gated, because as long as you have a Rainbow Dragon in the deck, then you can use this effect. But if you don't have the Rainbow Dragon in the deck, then unfortunately you are not able to use this effect. So we need to play these bricks, and we are not even able to summon them in this deck because you don't play so many Crystal Beasts. You could play a few more just so you could do it, but again, getting all 7 of them access on your field, spell and trap zone, and your graveyard, not the easiest thing to do. We are playing 2 copies of Rainbow Dragon. Just 2 I think are enough. When you resolve the Zenith Crystal Beast twice, I feel like you're in a good position. Even if you draw 1, you can still use it once, and we are playing playing 50 cards in the deck just so that we don't see a lot of those bricks that we don't really want to see in our hand, and this is one of them. So basically making the deck larger makes the deck more consistent because of issues like this. Now let's get into the more generic stuff we put in the deck in order to make the deck work with other engines. We play 3 copies of Noble Knight Shieldbearer. Now this card is a card that on summon you can banish a light monster from your grave, draw a card. This is not the important effect. The important effect is that you can banish this card from your hand or field to add a level 6 or lower winged beast monster from your deck to your hand. Now not only can this card add Sapphire Pegasus, which is the obvious thing you're playing in the deck, but it also adds the next card, which allows you to do some more fancy stuff during your opponent's turn, which is the 1 copy of Hopier Squadron. This is basically an Axel Synchro type of card that you can use from your hand to Axel Synchro during your opponent's turn. So during your opponent's main phase, you target a face-up monster you control, you special summon this card from your hand, and then you immediately Synchro summon with these 2 cards. This is a level 2 tuner monster, so the thing you want to do with this card is you want to have 2 level 4 monsters on your field and then keep them there during your opponent's turn. Do not go for any rank 4 unless you know that a card like Dweller is going to destroy your opponent completely if they're playing something like Tear Laments. But if you're going blind, then maybe sometimes it's better to keep this card, because the play is to go into Desert Locust during your opponent's turn, you make them discard a card, and then afterwards you use Desert Locust effect, basically do the same thing again, you synchro with it in the other level 4 you had, and you go for Baron de Flor. So it's basically a free Omni Negate while also making your opponent discard a card. And in matchups and anything against anything against other than Tear Laments, this is going to be really, really powerful. Now we're playing another engine that I've been enjoying a lot in the deck, and I feel like people should catch up with this card because it's just so free in the deck like this, because you have so many ways to search it, and we have 3 copies of Windwitch Icebell. Now this card in any deck that has searchable wind monsters, it's very easy to get access to because of Wind the Wind Channeler. In anything other than that, then yes, this card might be a little bit inconsistent because you have to play 2 bricks in order to make this engine work, so it's like playing 3 good cards and 2 bad cards. But when you have access to a lot of wind monsters, Wind the Wind Channeler makes it so you have 6 good cards and 2 bricks, so the engine is much more consistent. And we all know Icebell, we know that the 1 card Crystal Wing can be very, very oppressive. This Crystal Wing cannot be destroyed by card effects either, so yeah, this card is really powerful. And this is why I mentioned that you get locked into wins a lot of the time, so even though you have this card on the field, Hopier Squadron makes sure that even though you cannot use the rest of the monsters as rank 4 fodder, you can still have them on the field and do something with them during your opponent's turn, so you can end up with a Crystal Wing and a Baron de Flor to disrupt your opponent. We have 1 copy of Glassbell. This is the mandatory card you have played because of Icebell. You summon this from the deck with Icebell, and then you search the 1 copy of Snowbell here, and then you special summon the Snowbell. You go for a level 7 Synchro. Mainly if you're going first, you're going for Wind Pegasus to have insurance in the graveyard. If you're going second, you're going for Fast Dragon to disrupt your opponent, and then you just go for the indestructible Crystal Wing. So yeah, this combo is really powerful in the deck. And we play 3 copies of Wind the Wind Channeler. This is the card that you can discard herself with another wind monster to add a wind monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand, and you basically cannot activate monster effects for the rest of the turn except wind monsters. But the thing is, you have so many ways to search wind monsters, being with the Sapphire Pegasus and the Cobalt Eagle, of course, just because of how many searches we have in the deck right now. So it's not very difficult to get another wind in your hand with a discard to basically get access to your Icebell, so you can have exactly what you need in order to combat your opponent. Now let's get to the spell cards. Let's start with the new spell cards that we have that are actually really, really good for the deck. So first we have Awakening of the Crystal Ultimate. So this card is basically a searcher and a Foolish Burial. So being a Foolish Burial is important because we did get a new card in the Megatins that basically gives us another win condition. So being able to Foolish a card instead of searching makes a lot of sense for a card like this because of certain cards the deck has. But also you can special summon a Crystal Beast monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, or your spell and trap zone. So it's another way to basically get Ruby Carbuncle on the field. So this card, it makes it so that the deck is more consistent and that the deck has more power. And the route that Konami chose to go for the deck is that even though they gave us basically no boss monsters other than monsters that we have to commit a lot to summon, they gave us consistency cards and disruption cards, which is more than enough because the generic extra deck makes it so we can combat our opponent with powerful monsters without even having to rely on the deck's own boss monsters. So we needed consistency, and this card is one of them. But we also have 3 copies of Rainbow Bridge of the Heart. So on top of this card being searchable, because Crystal Lords searches Rainbow Bridge cards, this card is going to search you the crystal cards. So it's a bridge, no pun intended, that can get you from one card to basically another card. So we are starting with the bridge cards, and then this card gets you to your crystal cards by destroying a Crystal Beast card you control or in your hand. And on top of that, this card gives you an extra normal summon. So on top of being able to go for rank 4 plays, being able to go for even link 4 plays turn 1 because of how much the deck can spam if you don't use Icebell, then basically it means that you can have so many different monsters with Ruby, with the extra normal summon, with the Zenith Crystal Beast. Yeah, this deck, it basically do a lot. And also this card has a disruption effect because when you put a Crystal Beast in your spell and trap zone, you can target one card your opponent controls, and this card, you return them both to the hand. So yeah, this card is consistency, it's extra normal summon, and it's disruption. So it's an amazing amazing card. We have 3 copies of Rainbow Bridge. This is another searcher, which is also searchable, and it is not a once per turn effect that can search you any crystal, spell, and trap cards. So yeah, this card can search you consistency cards and can also search you the disruption trap cards, so it's a really good card. We're playing only 1 copy of Crystal Bond. Now, before the structure deck, I would feel like this was a mandatory 3 of, but now we have so many ways to search and so many ways to get access to the monsters that searching a monster specifically and putting another one in the spell and trap zone, it's not the most important effect right now because of how many other ways we have to do the exact same thing. If this card searched the crystal card and then put a 1 in the spell and trap zone, then yes, it would be a 3 of, but now I feel like 1 is enough. You can search it whenever you want, whenever you need the extra monsters on the field and the extra cards in the spell and trap zone to basically make sure that your traps are always live. So yeah, this card is a decent one. We are playing 1 copy of Crystal Beacon. This is another card that we can search that can get Ruby out of the deck, and the reason we are playing this even though we have the Awakening of the Crystal Ultimates is because this card is a once per turn that can sometimes be used only to get for the Rainbow Bridge cards, to either add them or dump them in the graveyard, so you need 1 extra card that is going to get you to your Ruby in order to be able to spam the field. We play 3 copies of Heritage of the Chalice because, like you saw before, we are playing a Noble Knight in the deck, a Noble Knight that can search a lot of good cards on top of being able to search Sapphire Pegasus, so we need to be able to search the searcher as consistently as possible, and this card does that, and we also have 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army to do the exact same thing. We are playing 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. Rainbow Bridge of Salvation is a card that you want to send to the graveyard as consistently as possible, and again, Awakening of the Crystal Ultimates, it can do that, but most of the time, if you don't have access to Rainbow Bridge of the Heart, you want to get that in your hand so you can get to your more plays. So when you have this, you can do the exact same thing without even needing the quick play spell card, so you can get access to another win condition, which is the next card, which is the 1 copy of Necro Valley. I'm sure you've seen a lot of Exo Sister decks or even other random decks that are trying to abuse this card to basically counter tier elements in the format, and yeah, that's how powerful this card is. Just activating this card, it's enough to win you some games sometimes. So being able to search a field spell with this particular deck is so crucial, because this card basically can sometimes add the nail in the coffin against a lot of matchups that basically does not interact with your own deck at all, so you don't care if this card is on field, you just basically mean that your opponent is not going to be able to play and your plays are free to go. And we play 1 copy of Called by the Grave because it's an insanely powerful card. For the trap cards, we have 3 copies of Crystal Conclave. Now, the cool thing about the trap cards that we have in the deck is that they are not once per turn. They are not like Salamangreat trap cards where you could play like only 1 Rage and 1 Roar per turn and you would not want to max them out because if you draw multiples, then basically they're dead. But in this particular deck, the traps are both not once per turn, so it's very safe to max them out because you want to search them when you don't have them, but when you see them, you have free range to search them maybe multiple times if you know they're really good against a certain matchup. For example, this card can bounce cards, which against a lot of decks is really powerful. So yeah, this card, it's a floater as well. It's continuous trap because when your Crystal Beast monster is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon another one from the deck, and you can use the other effect to send this card and target a Crystal Beast card control, and you return both of these cards to the hand. But we also have 3 copies of Crystal Miracle, which is a new trap card. This is basically the Infinity Barrier of the deck, and I feel like every deck should have a card like that by now, especially weaker decks. It's like Konami gets a free range of which card to make. When they're thinking about support for a deck, let's just make an Infinity Barrier, and then we'll think about the rest of the cards, and that's what they do. They did it with the same deck, so yeah. This card is a not once per turn Infinity Barrier, and also it has an effect that if Crystal Beast card is placed in your spell and trap zone while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it to place a Crystal Beast monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard in your spell and trap zone as well, so it gives you more monsters in your spell and trap zone, and only the second effect is once per turn. The negation effect is not once per turn, so playing 3 copies of both of these trap cards makes sense because you can use them as many times as you want. And the last card in the main deck is 1 copy of Rainbow Bridge of Salvation. Do not even read this card on field effect, it's never going to come up. What you care about is the effect that you can banish this card to add a field spell from your deck to your hand and a Crystal Beast. So this card searches your Necro Valley, and it searches you a play as well by searching Sapphire Pegasus, and we talked about it already. Necro Valley against a lot of matchups, and especially the best deck of the format tier elements, is basically an auto-win bad. For the extra deck, we have the Synchro Monsters first. We have 1 copy of Wind Pegasus Static Gnister. This is for the Wind Witch combo. When you're going first, you want to make this level 7 Synchro, because when it's in the graveyard and your opponent blows up one of your cards, you can banish it to return one of your opponent's cards back into the deck, so they can basically make them play in a weird way when they know that you have it, and if they forget that you have it, then you can punish them by destroying your cards. For when you're going second with the Wind Witch engine, we have the 1 copy of Lear Wing Fast Dragon. This is a card that can negate the effect of an extra deck monster on the field and make its attack point 0, so it's a card that when you're going second, it can basically mean that your opponent is not going to be able to have free range to negate your Wind Witch combo, because the Wind Witch combo is very vulnerable going second to a lot of cards. For example, when you have something like a Dragostapelia to fight, then they just negate the Glass Bell, and you're not going to be able to go into Crystal Wing because you don't have access to the Snow Bell. But this card being in the extra deck, you can negate another card, for you can negate anything like maybe a Kaleido Heart, you can negate a second Dragostapelia that you're going to summon during your turn. So yeah, this card can do a lot even without Crystal Wing. And we also have the one copy of Crystal Wing. You can summon this very easily, and especially in a format right now where people do not play a lot of hand traps. It's not like your opponent is going to Ash Ice build. They don't play a lot of hand traps anymore. So yeah, this card being able to get to the board very consistently means that your opponent is going to have a hard time dealing with it, because the only way to deal with this card is basically snow it Book of Moon face down, because people do not play a lot of Xyz monsters now that can deal with this card attack points wise, and the effect to boost itself when it battles a level 5 or higher monster, and snow build protecting it being destroyed by card effects makes it a menace to deal with. We have one copy of Desert Locust. This is here for the Hopier Squadron play. You summon this card during your opponent's turn, you make them discard a card. Hopefully you do not do this against Tear Elements, because if you do, then they're going to get a plus instead of a minus. But against any other deck, this card is really good because you're going to use its effect to Synchro Summon again afterwards to go into Baron the Floor to get another negate on the board. For the Xyz monsters, we have one copy of Abyss Dweller. It's another way to instantly win against Tear Elements, or at least not win, but just get your turn back, because they're not going to be able to do much, because this deck can summon rank 4 monsters very easily. So if you don't have access to Necro Valley, this is basically the next best thing you can hopefully summon to try to disrupt your opponent. We have one copy of Baguska, another card that against a lot of other matchups, it's a card that is going to get you your turn back, and once you get your turn back, this deck can spam a lot of monsters very fast to go for Naxos Code Talker, so you can go for game. We do play the Zodiac package for going second. We do have one copy of Chaka9 because you need only 2 level 4 monsters to summon her, and then you summon Borbo on top of her, you attack directly, and then you summon the one copy of Zeus on top of Borbo to basically have 4 material Zeus, so you can destroy your opponent's board before you commit too much on the board. And when you're going second and you have a deck that can use rank 4 monsters and you don't have a lot of extra deck space issues, I feel like these 3 cards are really good to include. It'll make your life a lot easier going second. And for the Link monsters, the first one is one copy of Lina the Light Charmer. It's the only Charmer you can summon that makes sense to play, because yes, you can summon Ausa and yes, you can summon Wind, but these 2 attributes don't make much sense, especially in this format. You're not going to have a lot of good monsters to steal, but this card being able to steal cards like Snow and a lot of other good light monsters makes her a really powerful summon, and we can summon her because of Ruby being a light monster. We have one copy of Masquerena. Sometimes you can summon rank 4 on the field, but also have 2 other monsters, so you can either go for an Appaloosa instead of a rank 4, but if you know this rank 4, like a Dweller can win you the game, you can go for a Masquerena, so after you use Dweller's effect, you can Masquerena the Dweller away for a Unicorn, basically destroy your opponent's last final play, because when they don't have their graveyard, Tear Elements decks try to spam their board with cards like Dangers to go for a Zero-Boros or something, so if you know that this play can disrupt their final attempt to go for game, then you can go for it and win the game this way. We have the one copy of Nightmare Unicorn. You can summon this either on your opponent's turn with Masquerena, or you can steal a monster with Lina to link climb into this card, and then when you have another monster on the field, you can summon either the one copy of Appaloosa if you want more disruptions, especially going first, or you can summon the one copy of Access Code going second to try to close out the game, because this card is just a beast. So yep, that's the deck, guys. I know that a lot of people enjoy Crystal Beasts, and I'm one of those people myself, and I couldn't be happier that we got such good cards in the structure deck. I know a lot of people are not excited for the structure deck, they mainly are hyped for the staples that we got in it, but if you're a fan of the deck, then I'm sure that you couldn't have asked for more. And yeah, Konami did a really great job, and I hope that they support other legacy decks like this as well, so they can make more viable archetypes for us to enjoy and play. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.